So, what if I told you that some of the most basic ideas about truth, things philosophers took for granted for centuries, were actually built on shaky ground? Well, that's what we're digging into today. We're looking at W.V.O. Quine's legendary paper, Two Dogmas of Empiricism. This wasn't just some small academic argument, it was a bombshell that totally rewired how we think about knowledge. Just think about this for a second. Are some things true just because? Like, a bachelor is an unmarried man. You don't need to do a survey to check that, right? It just is true by definition. This seems super obvious, and for a very long time it was a cornerstone of philosophy. But, as we're about to see, Quine showed that it's nowhere near as simple as it looks. And this idea, this belief in truth by meaning, wasn't some minor detail. It was a core, foundational pillar, a dogma. It was one of two really powerful assumptions that basically held up our entire theory of how we know stuff about the world. And Quine, he was about to show that these pillars were basically built on sand. Okay, so let's lay them out. What were these two big dogmas? They were the fundamental rules of empiricism. You know, the whole idea that our knowledge comes from what we can actually experience through our senses. These weren't just abstract ideas. They were the rulebook for how both science and philosophy thought we build a true picture of reality. So, for a long time, philosophers split all true statements into two neat little boxes. In one box, you had analytic truths. You don't need to check the world to know a square has four sides. It's right there in the meaning of the word square. In the other box, you had synthetic truths. To know if it's raining outside, you gotta go look. It's a truth about the world. Seems like a perfectly clear and solid distinction, right? And that right there brings us to the first dogma, the belief that there's this solid, unbreachable wall separating these two kinds of truth. Truths of language were seen as safe, certain, the bedrock. Truths of fact, well, those were messier, always depending on the next piece of evidence. The second dogma, reductionism, is just as big a deal. It's the idea that any meaningful statement we make, even something super complex like a law of physics, could, in theory, be boiled down and traced all the way back to a specific set of raw sense experiences. A direct one-to-one link between their grand ideas and what our eyes and ears tell us. All right, so the stage is set. We've got these two powerful dogmas that everyone accepts. And then along comes Quine. He takes aim squarely at that first dogma, that firm wall between the analytic and the synthetic, and he starts to tear it down with some surprisingly simple questions. He kicks things off with a question that's so simple, it's brilliant. He basically asks, okay, when we say something is true by virtue of its meaning, what is this meaning thing we're talking about? Can we actually pin it down and define it without, well, cheating? And this is his masterstroke, his central attack. Every single attempt to explain what analytic means just ends up chasing its own tail. You start off saying, okay, analytic truths depend on synonymy, two words meaning the same thing. But how do you define that? Well, you might say it's when two words are interchangeable. Okay, but for that to really work, it has to be necessarily true that they can be swapped. And what does necessarily true mean? Well, that's just another way of saying it's an analytic truth. And boom, we've just run in a giant circle. Quine himself had this beautiful way of putting it. He said the argument never hits solid ground. It just follows this closed curve in space. It's an argument that's supposed to explain something, but it just keeps assuming the very thing it's trying to explain. It's an illusion of an explanation. And here's a killer example of why just swapping words isn't good enough. As a matter of biological fact, every creature with a heart also has a kidney. So the phrases creature with a heart and creature with a kidney refer to the exact same group of animals. You can swap them in a sentence and it'll still be true. But does anyone really think those two phrases mean the same thing? No way. So just being able to swap words proves they refer to the same stuff. It doesn't prove they have the same meaning. So that wall between analytic and synthetic truths is starting to look pretty crumbly. Next, Quine turns his attention to the second dogma, reductionism. He basically argues that this idea of linking one statement to one specific experience is a total myth, because that's just not how our beliefs work. This is the heart of Quine's idea of holism. He says our beliefs don't line up one by one to get checked by reality. No. Instead, our entire system of knowledge, all our beliefs, all tangled together, faces the tribunal of sense experience as a whole, as a single corporate body. And the implications of this are just huge. Think about it. When some new experience comes along that doesn't fit with what we believe, it doesn't just knock out one single belief, it sends a ripple through the whole system. And we have a choice about what to change to make everything fit again. And here's the really wild part: any belief is on the table. Quine argued that if we had to, we could even decide to change the laws of logic to make our overall system work better. Nothing is sacred. Nothing is completely safe from revision. So, if the old models are broken, what do we replace them with? Well, Quine doesn't just tear things down, he builds something new. A really powerful new way to picture how our knowledge actually works. The old view, you could picture it as a pyramid. Right at the bottom, you have this solid, unshakable foundation of analytic truths and direct observations. Then you build everything else, layer by logical layer, on top of that. It's a very rigid, secure picture of knowledge. Quine just tosses that whole pyramid right out the window, and in its place, he gives us a web. A man-made fabric, as he calls it, where there's no single foundation. Every belief is connected to every other belief. It's not rigid, it's flexible, dynamic, and we're constantly reweaving it as we have new experiences. Now, inside this web, not all beliefs are created equal. Out at the edges, you've got your direct observations, like that leaf is green. Those are pretty easy to change if you get a new piece of information. But as you move toward the center of the web, you find our most deeply held beliefs, things like the laws of logic, mathematics, our big scientific theories. We are really, really reluctant to change those because messing with the center sends massive shockwaves through the entire web. But, and this is the crucial point, they are still revisable. The difference between a law of logic and an observation is just a matter of degree, not a difference in kind. So let's just pull this all together for a second. Dogma number 1, the clean split between analytic and synthetic truths, it fails because you can't actually define it without going in a circle. And dogma number 2, reductionism, it fails because our beliefs are never tested one by one, they're only tested as a giant, interconnected system. And what we're left with is what Quine famously called empiricism without the dogmas. It's a new picture of knowledge, and really of science itself. It's not about finding some absolute, certain foundation. Instead, knowledge is a practical, evolving tool, a web that we are constantly weaving and reweaving to help us make our way through the world. And this whole idea leaves us with a really fascinating final question, and this one's for you. If Quine is right, if literally every single one of our beliefs is at least in principle up for revision, what are the beliefs sitting at the very center of your own personal web? What are the ideas you'd be the most unwilling to ever change, and why?